All right, let's just dive right in. We're about to unpack a pretty counterintuitive idea about leadership, one that really pushes back on a core belief that, most of us have about what makes a great leader.
Look, we've all been told that great leaders are empathetic, right? They're respectful, they're active listeners, they try to build harmony. This whole idea of relational courtesy, basically being nice and agreeable, is seen as the proof, the validation that someone actually has what it takes to lead. And honestly, it feels right. It just makes sense. But what happens when we look at the numbers? What if, in certain kinds of systems, prioritizing that kind of relational harmony actually, well, what if it breaks things? What if the data tells a completely different and maybe even opposite story about what some teams really need from their leaders?
Okay, so this is the number that gets the whole conversation started. It's a Pearson correlation from a pretty big study. We're talking over 3,000 people across 98 countries. And what it shows is a negative correlation between the leadership quality respectful and a specific value system, what's known as the blue stage. Now, this is a mindset that really prioritizes order, rules, and duty. Now, that number, negative 0.043, it's not massive, I get it, but it is statistically significant. And what it does is it whispers that our big, common assumption about leadership, it might be dangerously incomplete. So what on earth does a number like that actually mean? Well, it means we need a much better map for understanding what leadership even is. This one little data point starts to crack the foundation of this one-size-fits-all approach, and it forces us to ask a much, much more precise question. Now, to really get that number, we need a super quick look at a framework called spiral dynamics. And don't worry, we are not doing a deep dive here. The easiest way to think about it is as a map of different worldviews. Each stage on this map, which they call a vMEME, is like a distinct psychological operating system that just prioritizes totally different values. And here's the kicker. Because these systems prioritize different things, they also validate leadership in completely different ways. So what one system sees as an absolute strength, another one can actually see as a critical weakness. So, just for a quick flyby, purple is all about tribal safety and belonging. Blue, which we've mentioned, values order, duty, and clear authority. Orange is focused on achievement and results, winning, basically. And green prioritizes harmony, empathy, and community. Now just try to keep those in mind, especially blue and green, because that's where the tension really shows up. And that brings us right to the heart of the problem, what we can call the validation mismatch. This is where the exact same leadership quality gets completely different reactions, all depending on the underlying value system, that psychological operating system, of the team or the organization. Okay, let's zoom in on that blue stage again. This is the world of order, of rules, of procedure. In a system like this, leadership isn't validated by how empathetic or understanding you are. Nope. It's validated by your legitimate procedural authority, your role in the hierarchy, your commitment to your duty, and how well you stick to the code. That's what actually matters. And you know what? The data backs this up perfectly. Just look at this chart. In these blue dominant systems, you can see qualities like empathy and active listener actually go into negative territory. Why? Because they can be seen as undermining the rules, by creating exceptions for people. But look over at influential, it has a positive correlation, because in this system, influence is understood to flow from that legitimate, rule-bound authority. Now, this is where it gets really fascinating when you contrast this with other systems. Check out green versus orange. For a green system, which values community, things like empathy and respect are the absolute foundation of trust and safety. But for an orange system, which is all about results and winning, empathy can feel like an inefficient distraction. It just slows down performance. And this chart just illustrates that divide so clearly. I mean, look at the positive correlation for empathy in green systems. It's highly, highly valued. But then look at the bar for orange. It shows the strongest negative correlation in the entire data set. Now, this doesn't mean orange thinkers are heartless, not at all. It's just that their operating system is built for strategic efficiency, and empathy can feel more like a bug than a feature. So what happens when we just ignore this mismatch? What happens when we try to force a green relational style of leadership onto a blue procedural system? Well, the results, they can be pretty catastrophic. It sets off a domino effect. As soon as relational courtesy becomes the main way we measure leaders, the procedural signals that a blue system totally relies on, they just start to erode. Trust in leadership falls apart because it's not based on the system's actual rules anymore. And what happens next? The remaining authority freaks out, doubles down, and becomes even more rigid.
And at the end of the day, your leadership metrics become totally useless because they're measuring the wrong thing, making any attempt to predict success completely unreliable. As the researcher Valery Kosenko puts it, that gap, that mismatch in what we value and what the system values, that is precisely where leadership breaks down. It's the exact point where our good intentions stop producing good results. So you might be thinking, if this is all so incredibly complex, how could anyone possibly navigate it? Well, this is where some new technologies are providing some really fascinating tools. Let's take a look at a trend called AI vibe coding. The idea is actually pretty simple. Instead of writing lines of code, you just talk to the AI. You use natural, everyday language to tell a large language model what you want to analyze or build, and it just creates the application or the visualization for you. It's like describing a picture you want an artist to draw. And this is what it actually looks like in practice. This is the SD Navigator, a tool built using exactly this method. A leader could just type in a query, something like, "Show me blue stage leadership validation patterns," and the AI generates the analysis, the charts, everything, instantly. No manual coding required. It makes this unbelievably complex data accessible and, more importantly, actionable. So here's the crucial takeaway. The real question isn't whether relational courtesy is good or bad. The question we all need to be asking is about the context. What validation signals does your team, your organization, your system actually run on? Because if you're measuring the wrong thing, you're not just getting bad data, you might be actively breaking the very system you're trying to lead. So think about it. What breaks in your world when the measure of a leader shifts from how they relate to others to how they uphold the rules?